Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of stone walls, damp wool, and the smell of roasting meat drifting from a street you can't quite see. It's late in Burgos, sometime in the 13th century, and the city glows under the soft, uneven flicker of torchlight. The cobblestones are slick from an earlier drizzle, and every shadow looks like it's hiding something, though you're not entirely sure whether that something wants to rob you, sell you a loaf of bread, or tell you a prophecy about your doom. Honestly, you wouldn't last 5 minutes here without spraining an ankle or offending someone important. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who's here in the middle of the night with me. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander through the twisting streets, your boots tapping against the stone in a rhythm almost swallowed by the hum of the city at night. Burgos is not sleeping. Somewhere to your left, a group of merchants still argues over the price of saffron as if it were the fate of the kingdom itself. To your right, a pair of guards in mail hauberks lean against a wooden doorframe, their spears resting casually but their eyes scanning every passerby. And ahead, in the faint gold glow, rises the silhouette of the cathedral. Unfinished, yet already ambitious, its skeletal towers reaching for a sky dotted with hesitant stars. It's easy to forget, standing here, that Castile is not a peaceful place. The city might seem orderly, its streets swept, its houses neat, but every conversation hums with the awareness of war, of borders that are more suggestion than certainty. You overhear a farmer muttering about raids from the south, his voice dipping when he mentions the Moors. His companion, perhaps sensing your curiosity, shifts the topic to grain prices. As you pass under a stone arch, a chill clings to you. The air smells faintly of damp parchment. A scribe's workshop is nearby. Through the half-open shutters, you see a thin man hunched over a table, his quill dancing across a sheet of vellum. He pauses, dips the nib, and then, without looking up, says something in Latin. You catch only a fragment. Rex absens, the absent king. The thought follows you into the plaza, where the last of the market stalls are being dismantled. A woman with a scarf wrapped tightly around her head sells roasted chestnuts, the smell both sweet and faintly smoky. She eyes you as if she knows something about your journey that you don't yet. A bell tolls from somewhere deep within the city. Slow, deliberate, and impossibly heavy. You turn toward the sound, but before you can take a step, a boy darts past, nearly knocking into you. In his hand is a small wooden token carved with a crown. He vanishes into the shadows without a word. Somewhere in the darkness, a voice mutters about the throne of Castile, and that's when it hits you. Here, even the cobblestones might be carrying messages. You keep walking. The road out of Burgos is less a road and more a stubborn scar across the land. Hard-packed dirt, littered with small stones that shift treacherously under your boots. You follow it into the pale light of morning, where the fog hasn't yet decided whether to rise or sink. Somewhere behind you, the city is waking up, but here the world belongs to the steady crunch of your steps and the faint jingling of harnesses. Up ahead, a cluster of riders emerges through the mist, pilgrims, judging by the scallop shells tied to their cloaks. They're headed east, toward the Camino de Santiago, the great artery of faith that carries the desperate, the devout, and the dangerously bored toward the shrine at Compostela. You fall into step with them, and quickly discover that pilgrims are much like travelers today. They walk, they gossip, and they collect stories like charms on a bracelet. One man, a wiry fellow with the leathery skin of someone who's met more sun than shade, tells you about a knight he saw along the way. The knight was traveling alone, which is odd enough, But stranger still was the thing strapped to the saddle. A sealed chest bound with chains. No one knows what's in it, but apparently he sleeps with one hand resting on the lock. Some say it's gold, the man says. Others say it's bones. He grins, revealing 2 teeth that seem to have negotiated their own peace treaty. The path winds past low stone walls, each one marking the stubborn claim of someone who likely inherited the land before memory began. Sheep watch you from behind a fence, chewing slowly as if calculating your worth in wool. The air smells of wet grass and wood smoke, familiar, almost comforting, until a new scent slips in. Something metallic, faint, but enough to set the hairs on your neck upright. You glance around, but the source remains hidden. By midday, the group reaches a crossroads marked by a weathered shrine. It's just a rough carving of the Virgin, but pilgrims treat it like a royal audience. Candles flicker in the breeze, their wax pooled and hardened on the stone base. One young woman kneels to pray, her lips moving fast, as though she's reciting not just a request, but an entire list of grievances with God. You pause there, tracing a crack in the stone with your finger, when a passing merchant joins the group. He's driving a mule piled with bolts of cloth in colors richer than anything you've seen in Burgos. He lowers his voice and tells the pilgrims, perhaps for the first time, perhaps for the 50th, about rumors of unrest in Aragon. The king there, he says, is growing nervous. Alliances are fraying, and there are whispers, just whispers, that an old claim to the Castilian throne might be stirring again. Pilgrim laughs it off, but not entirely. You can see it in his eyes, the same way you might laugh about a crack in a dam while listening closely for the sound of rushing water. As the road slopes downward toward a shallow river, you catch sight of a single rider on the opposite bank. The horse is black, its rider in a simple brown cloak. He sits completely still, watching your group. The air seems to tighten around you. Then, without a word, he turns and disappears into the trees. Best keep walking, someone mutters, and so you do. By the time you see the banners, the road has widened, smoothed, and picked up the scent of too many flowers in one place, always a sure sign of a royal wedding. The air feels heavier here, as if it's carrying the weight of not just perfume, but expectation. Word has been humming along the Camino for days. Castile and Aragon are binding themselves together in marriage, sealing more than just a romantic union. You suspect the bride and groom barely know each other's favorite foods, but everyone knows whose lands and armies are being combined. You're swept into a tide of travelers heading toward a great open courtyard framed by freshly scrubbed stone buildings. Bright fabrics flap from windows, their colors shouting in the sun. The crowd is already pressed shoulder to shoulder, each person jostling for the best glimpse of history, or at least the best story to tell later. You catch fragments of conversation. Speculation about the size of the dowry, the number of oxen in the feast, the possibility that someone will faint in the heat. A line of armored men parts the crowd, their halberds gleaming. Behind them, the bride arrives, draped in silk so heavy it might as well be chainmail. Her hair is braided into intricate loops, pinned with gold, and her expression says she has rehearsed every polite smile she'll need for the day. The groom, by contrast, looks like a man who has just been told he owns a castle he's never seen. The priest begins the ceremony beneath a canopy of white linen, his voice carrying over the courtyard like a slow drumbeat. You notice the guards posted along the rooftops, their eyes never resting. One of them is watching not the couple but the guests. At the moment the vows are sealed, a flock of pigeons bursts into the air from somewhere above, startling more than a few people. It might have been planned for dramatic effect, but you see the twitch of a guard's hand toward his sword, and you know it wasn't. The feast that follows is held in a hall the size of a small village. Long tables bow under the weight of roasted game, fresh bread, and pies so elaborate you're afraid to cut into them. You're seated near the end, where the wine arrives later and the gossip sooner. The talk here is less about the happy couple and more about what this alliance means. Fewer skirmishes along the border, perhaps, but more political marriages, more delicate balances of power. One older woman, her hands gnarled from years of weaving, leans toward you and whispers a story about an earlier wedding between the kingdoms, one that ended in disaster when the bride vanished on her wedding night. Some say she fled to the moors, the woman says, eyes darting to make sure no one hears. Others say she never left the castle at all. Before you can ask what that means, the music swells and a line of dancers begins weaving between the tables. You watch as their feet stamp in time, the floor trembling beneath the rhythm. For a moment, you forget about politics, about the watching guards, about the undercurrent of tension. Then you see him again, the rider from the riverbank, slipping in through a side door, face still hidden under that same brown cloak. And just like before, he disappears before you can decide whether to follow. The wedding celebrations dissolve into memory as the road carries you south, the land rolling in slow, dry waves. You arrive at Toledo under a bruised sky, its walls rising like a jagged crown above the Tagus River. Even from here, the city feels layered. Christian towers, Moorish arches, and Jewish courtyards pressed together as if time forgot to organize them. The air smells faintly of lime mortar and dust, with a metallic tang from the river below. Crossing the bridge is like stepping into another world. The stones underfoot are worn smooth by centuries of feet. Traders, priests, soldiers, thieves, all moving through the same narrow gate. Inside, Toledo breathes in different languages: Castilian, Arabic, Hebrew, Latin. A woman in a dark veil passes you, murmuring to the child clutching her skirt. A merchant argues with a customer over the price of saffron, their gestures sharp enough to cut. You wander upward toward the Alcazar, its walls holding both Christian banners and the geometric patterns of Moorish masons. It's an uneasy marriage of stone, beautiful, but never quite at peace. A guide at the gate tells you the fortress has seen more banners than most people have birthdays. He grins when he says it, but his eyes measure you, as though weighing whether you'll live long enough to see the next change. Inside the courtyard, you hear it, a faint scratching sound, like something dragging across stone. You follow it into a shadowed corridor where the walls are carved with calligraphy that doesn't match the Christian frescoes above. Your fingers trace the grooves in the stone until they stop at a jagged crack. An old man emerges from the dark. His robe is stained with something black that might once have been ink. He glances at the wall, then at you. They say, he begins in a voice so low you have to lean in, that when the Moors built this place, they buried something in the foundation, a promise or a curse, depending on which side you're on. He steps closer, and they say if you press your ear to the wall on the night of the new moon, you'll hear it speaking back. You almost laugh, but then you notice his hands, shaking, just enough to betray that this isn't a story he tells for coin. You glance at the crack again, wondering if the cool air that seeps from it is your imagination. Outside, the bells of the cathedral toll, calling the faithful to evening prayers. The sound rolls through the streets, threading together the different quarters of the city. Somewhere beyond the walls, a thunderhead is forming, its shadow creeping toward Toledo. You think of the rider in the brown cloak, and you can't help but wonder, if he's following you, what does he want here? In a city where every stone seems to remember a different owner? The answer doesn't come. Only the wind, slipping through the alleys like someone who knows all the back doors. Night falls faster than you expect in Toledo, the alleys swallowing light until only the cathedral towers still glow, their windows lit like watchful eyes. You're drawn away from the main square by the sound of footsteps, not hurried, but deliberate, echoing against the stones. The air cools, and the familiar smells of bread and roasting meat fade, replaced by something drier, older, candle wax, maybe, and dust that has been waiting centuries to be disturbed. You find yourself before a narrow, arched doorway, its heavy wooden planks bound by iron straps. It's ajar, just enough for a line of golden light to spill into the street. A low murmur leaks through, the words thick and steady. Latin. You recognize it now. The long, rolling chants of monks, though these voices are deeper, older somehow, carrying not joy but endurance. You slip inside. The small chapel is lit only by a handful of candles, their flames bending under the faint breath of a draft. Figures in white habits kneel before the altar, their hoods pulled low so that you can barely see the curve of their noses in shadow. A heavy silence sits in the air between their verses, a silence that feels as intentional as the prayer itself. One monk, standing near the back, notices you. He doesn't frown or beckon, but simply inclines his head toward the far side of the room. You follow his gaze and see it, an alcove carved into the wall, half hidden behind a faded curtain. The fabric is stiff, as though it hasn't been touched in years. When you pull it aside, you discover not another prayer niche, but a stairway spiraling down into the dark. The air here is cooler, sharper. You descend, each step groaning under your weight until you reach a narrow corridor lined with shelves. The walls are close enough that you can touch both sides at once, your fingertips brushing the edges of leather-bound volumes swollen with age. A single candle burns on a desk at the far end, its light spilling over an open manuscript. The script is precise, the ink black as night, but what catches your attention are the margins. They're filled with tiny illustrations, strange beasts with human eyes, crowned figures holding objects you can't identify, and, in one corner, a castle wall marked with a jagged crack. You've seen that crack before, in Toledo's fortress. You're still staring when the monk from above appears behind you. He says nothing at first, just watches you look. Finally, in a voice almost too soft to hear, he asks, "Do you believe that stones remember?" You don't answer right away, because in the stillness you think you can hear it, the faintest hum like words being spoken just beyond the edge of understanding. The monk nods, as if your silence is answer enough. Some truths, he says, are not kept in books. They're kept in the places that made them. A bell rings above, shattering the moment. The monk gestures toward the stairs. "Go," he says, "and do not return here on the new moon." You don't ask why. As you step back into the cool night air, you feel the city pressing close, like it knows you've taken something from it, even if that something is only a question. The storm you'd seen building earlier finally rolls into Toledo before dawn, its first growl waking you like an impatient messenger. Rain rattles the shutters, and somewhere nearby a loose roof tile claps in the wind like a warning signal. You're not the only one awake. Through the thin wall of your lodgings, you hear your host muttering to someone, their voices sharp and hushed. When you step into the street, the city has been rinsed into sharper contrast. The whitewashed walls of Moorish houses gleam in the dim light, while the stone towers look darker, heavier. The Tagus below churns a muddy brown, its banks swallowing reeds and debris, as if the river has decided it's time to reclaim things. Your plan, if you can call following a trail of strange coincidences a plan, takes you toward the Jewish quarter. Narrower streets here, the walls leaning in as if conspiring. A faint smell of parchment and old wood drifts from an open shop where a bookseller, her hair bound in a red scarf, is carefully stacking scrolls in waxed cases. She eyes you with curiosity but says nothing, letting you pass into a small plaza where rain pools in the uneven stones. At the center stands a fountain, 3 tiers of pale stone carved with interlaced designs. It's beautiful but weathered, as though time has been erasing its meaning letter by letter. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sits on the fountain's rim with a piece of chalk, sketching something on the wet stone. You glance down and recognize the pattern, not from any heraldry you know, but from the manuscript you saw in the monk's alcove. The boy notices you staring and wipes the drawing away with his sleeve. "You shouldn't look at that," he says, not as a warning but as if explaining something obvious. Before you can ask why, a clap of thunder rattles through the square, and an older man in a rain-darkened cloak hurries over, grabbing the boy by the shoulder. His face is partially hidden by his hood, but his voice, low, deliberate, with that same cadence you remember from the rider who passed you outside Burgos. They vanish into an alley without another word, leaving you alone in the rain. You take the fountain's edge in your hands and lean close. There's an inscription there, worn nearly smooth, but the letters are still legible if you tilt your head just right. It's not in Latin, nor Castilian. It's Hebrew, and though you can't translate it fully, you recognize one word: gate. A gust of wind shivers through the plaza. Behind you, a door creaks open and a woman's voice calls in Castilian. It's not safe to linger there when the river's high. You turn to look, but the door has already shut. The rain is falling harder now, cold enough to sting your cheeks, but you linger a little longer by the fountain, because for just a moment, between the roar of the river and the hiss of the rain, you think you hear something else, a murmur rising from the fountain's base, a language you don't know, but that still feels like it's speaking to you. You step back, the pattern still burned into your memory, and take the long way back through streets that seem narrower than before. Somewhere in this city, pieces of the past are pressing toward you, and you can't shake the feeling they've decided you're part of their story whether you like it or not. The next morning arrives dressed in sunlight, as if last night's storm had been nothing but a passing dream. The streets are drying, the scent of wet stones still clinging to the air. Merchants are already setting up stalls, their voices floating through the labyrinth of alleys in a half-dozen languages. Toledo always wakes fast, like someone who slept in armor and expects trouble before breakfast. You follow the slope down toward the city gates, where the main road snakes east. There's a low hum of activity. Carts loaded with barrels, packs of mules clinking with copper bells, and, near the outer wall, a group of soldiers drilling in the morning sun. Their tabards are crimson, stitched with the golden castle of Castile. You slow your steps because one of the men, taller, broad-shouldered, turns mid-swing and you see it. On the leather of his belt, etched into the buckle, is the same jagged crack you've seen twice now. First in the monk's manuscript, then chalked on the fountain. He catches your gaze, wipes sweat from his brow, and walks toward you. The other soldiers keep drilling, pretending not to notice. "You've been asking questions," he says, voice low enough that only you can hear. It's not a threat exactly, more like someone stating the weather. You tell him you've only been walking, seeing the city. "That's the problem," he replies. "Some things don't want to be seen." He glances toward the gate. "If you're heading east, the bridge is out from the storm. You'll need the north road." But he hesitates, scanning the street before leaning slightly closer. "If you find yourself near Huerta del Rey, keep away from the old watchtower. People say it's empty, but it isn't." Before you can ask more, he's already turning back to his unit, slipping into their formation without another word. You leave the gate behind, heading north as instructed, though you're not sure whether it's curiosity or caution that keeps your feet moving. The road curves along the edge of the Tagus before lifting into open country. the sound of the river fading behind you. Fields spread out in gold and green, broken by olive groves and the occasional crumbling wall that once meant something to someone. By midday, you spot it. A dark, narrow shape on the horizon, the watchtower. Even from here, you can tell it's not entirely abandoned. A thin ribbon of smoke curls from its base, and the glint of movement flashes in one of its high windows. You remember the soldier's warning. You remember the crack in the buckle in the manuscript on the fountain stone. And you remember how all of them, monk, boy, soldier, spoke like they already knew the next page of your story. The sun is warm on your back. The road to Huerta del Rey lies ahead. And the watchtower waits like a question you're not sure you want to answer. Still, your steps slow. Because questions, once they find you, have a way of insisting on answer. The watchtower draws you in the way a candle tempts a moth. Part curiosity, part recklessness, and a whisper of inevitability. Its base is ringed by coarse grass and stones stained darker than the rest, as if rainwater here carries secrets in its color. The air smells faintly of ash, though you see no fire now. You circle the base once. The door, or what passes for one, is a warped slab of oak held together with iron straps. A carving marks its center. Not the cracked symbol this time, but a twisting knot of lines that pulls your gaze inward until you blink and look away. The hinges groan as you push. Inside, light filters down through the narrow slits in the walls, striping the dust that hangs in the air. The space is smaller than it looked from the road, but the walls are thick, and the stone under your palm is cold even in the heat of the day. A table stands in the corner, its surface scored with deep cuts. On it lies an unfurled scrap of parchment weighed down by a smooth river stone. The ink is faded, but the lines are clear enough. A map of the region. Roads and rivers curl like veins, but there's an extra mark, a small black star, in a place you don't recognize. No name, no explanation. A shuffle from above makes you freeze. You tilt your head, listening. The sound repeats. Soft, deliberate steps on wood. Someone's up there. The staircase spirals up the inner wall, boards creaking under your weight. Halfway up, you catch a glimpse through one of the arrow slits. The countryside rolls endlessly, olive groves flashing in the wind. The road to Huerta del Rey a pale thread. When you reach the top, you find not a garrison, not a lookout post, but a single figure seated cross-legged in the corner. A woman in a travel-stained cloak, her hair loose, her face shadowed by the narrow shaft of light from above. She doesn't look startled to see you. Instead, she studies you like you've kept her waiting. "You've seen the mark," she says. You nod. "They think it's theirs," she continues. "The soldiers, the monks, even the traders in the markets who carry it on their coin pouches. But it's older than all of them." Her eyes drift toward the black star on the map you'd seen below. "It's a place, but not one on any road, you know. And you'll never reach it unless—" She pauses, a half-smile touching her lips. "Unless you stop thinking like a traveler and start thinking like someone who's already been there." You want to ask her what that means, but she stands, moving toward the slit window. The wind tugs at her cloak, and you catch a faint scent of rosemary and smoke. "When you leave here," she says, "don't take the road. Follow the river until it disappears. Then keep walking." She doesn't say goodbye. By the time you descend the stairs and look back, the top chamber is empty. The road still gleams pale in the distance, but now it feels like the wrong direction entirely. The Tagus glimmers to the south, its bends catching the sun like pieces of a broken mirror. You set your feet toward it not because you believe her entirely, but because a part of you does. The Tagus greets you with the sound of slow water over stone, a steady murmur that feels older than the watchtower, older than the road, older than even the kingdoms themselves. You leave the dirt track behind and step into the grass along the riverbank. Each step presses dew into your boots, and dragonflies skim low over the surface, their wings catching light like shards of blue glass. The river is not in a hurry. It moves with the patient confidence of something that knows it will outlast you. Occasionally, it widens into quiet pools where willow roots dangle into the water, then narrows again between rocks that force it to speak in low, urgent tones. By midday, the path, if you can call it that, has narrowed so much you're forced to pick your way along tilted stones at the water's edge. You're watching your footing when you notice the first carving. It's on a flat boulder half submerged in the current. The crack symbol, cut deep enough that moss has grown along the grooves. You touch it, and the stone feels warmer than the sun could account for. More appear as you go, on tree trunks, on the backs of abandoned millstones, even scratched into the clay banks where the water has receded. None of them fresh, but none worn away either, as if time has been told to leave them alone. By late afternoon, the river vanishes. One moment it's there, curling around a bend, and the next it slides beneath a sheer wall of limestone and simply doesn't come out again. The air here is cooler, damp with the scent of hidden places. You follow the cliff face, half expecting a cave, but instead you find a narrow archway, just wide enough for a single person to pass through. Inside, the light dims immediately, and your footsteps echo in a way that makes the space feel larger than it is. The passage opens into a hollow between cliffs, a place no road could ever reach. There's a pool in the center, fed by a thin ribbon of water spilling from the rock above. Around its edge, someone has arranged stones in deliberate patterns, circles, lines, and that familiar crack, each shape pointing toward the water as if expecting it to answer. A low voice breaks the stillness. "You're late." From the shadows on the far side of the pool steps a man in a plain brown tunic, carrying a staff carved with the same knot you saw on the watchtower door. His beard is streaked with gray, and his eyes flick to the satchel at your side, as if he already knows what you've brought. "They sent you the long way," he says, not unkindly. "Perhaps that's best." He gestures toward the water. "Drink. You'll see what they don't want you to see." You hesitate. The pool is perfectly clear, the surface rippling with each drop from the cliff above. It reflects you, but just slightly wrong. Your reflection turns its head a heartbeat after you do. Somewhere above, a raven calls, its voice sharp against the muted air. The man waits, patient as the river you followed here. Your throat is dry. Your curiosity is louder than your caution. You kneel. The water is cold enough to make your teeth ache, but you drink anyway. It tastes faintly of minerals and something else you can't name, like the air right before a thunderstorm. The moment it hits your stomach, the world shifts. The pool deepens in your vision, pulling you forward, though your body remains kneeling. You're no longer seeing the hollow between the cliffs, but something layered beneath it. The stones around the water shimmer and rearrange themselves into walls, towers, and gates, all in miniature, as if the land is remembering its old skin. A city rises there, but not any you've walked before. The streets curve like the knot on the watchtower door. Its gates are guarded by men in armor that catches the light like oil on water, and banners hang from the towers, deep red, emblazoned with a symbol you've only seen once before, in the faintest ink on the map in the watchtower, the Black Star. You move, or maybe the vision moves you, through its alleys. Merchants shout prices for goods you don't recognize, spices that smell like cinnamon's wilder cousin, and fabrics dyed in colors your eyes can't quite settle on. Then the sound of hoofbeats. A rider cuts through the crowd on a pale horse, his cloak a storm of blue and silver. His face is hidden by a half-mask, but his voice carries as he calls. The council meets at dusk, all gates closed. The vision bends again, and you're in a chamber lit by oil lamps, their flames bending away from some unseen draft. Around a long table sit figures in mismatched robes and armor. At the head, a woman with a crown so thin it could be mistaken for a headband leans forward. "They're coming from the west," she says. "They carry the cross of Aragon, and they will not ask twice." One of the robed figures slams his palm on the table. "We have the river. We have the walls. We've stood for centuries." "You've stood in shadow," she cuts in. "The walls are not for them. They're for us. And they will keep us in as much as keep them out." The image fractures like glass, the pool's surface wobbling under your reflection. You're back in the hollow, your mouth still wet from the water, your knees pressed into damp soil. The man with the staff studies you, his expression unreadable. "You saw the city?" You nod. "It's still there," he says. "Not in your time, not in theirs, but in the cracks between both." You ask him why you were meant to see it. "Because," he says, "someone is about to break the walls, and not in the way they think." The raven calls again, closer now, and he glances toward the cliffs. "Go before the gates close. And remember, Aragon doesn't knock." When you turn back toward the archway, the sound of the river is gone. Only the drip of water from the cliff remains, like the hollow itself is holding its breath. You climb back through the archway, expecting the same damp air and hidden riverbank, but the world has shifted in subtle, unsettling ways. The sun sits lower than it should, its light a deep gold that stains the rocks and grass like aged parchment. You glance back, but the arch has vanished into an unbroken wall of limestone. No seam, no shadow, no way back. The path ahead winds through a shallow valley. The grass here is waist-high, whispering against your legs as you push through. Every so often, a gust of wind flattens it in long, deliberate ripples. Too even, too precise to be random. It's like the land is passing along a message in a language you almost understand. After an hour, you spot the first sign of life. A broken cart half swallowed by thistles, its wheels sunk deep into the earth as if it has been here for decades. A wooden chest lies open beside it, empty except for a single scrap of cloth bearing that black star, faded but unmistakable. You keep moving, but the sky keeps dimming. The low hum of insects fades, replaced by the distant thud of hoofbeats. Slow, measured, unhurried. You glance over your shoulder. Nothing yet. The valley narrows into a gap between two ridges, and when you emerge on the other side, you see it. The city from the pool's vision, full-sized now, its towers catching the last shards of daylight. The Black Star banners ripple from the gates, and a thin line of smoke rises from somewhere within the walls. It should feel triumphant, reaching it before the gates close, but there's something wrong. The air smells faintly of iron, and the grass near the road is matted as if pressed down by many bodies lying still for too long. As you approach, the gates begin to swing shut. From the shadows just beyond them, a cloaked figure slips out, walking straight toward you without hurry. The hood hides most of their face, but you catch a glint of metal at the jawline, an old scar or something stranger. "You're early," they say, their voice low but carrying easily over the wind. "Good. That means you might survive the first night." They glance past you, toward the sound of those hoofbeats growing steadily louder. You've got two choices: inside, where they'll try to use you, or out here, where they'll try to kill you. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounds, deep, resonant, like the ground itself is calling for blood. The figure tilts their head. "Well, decision time." The gates are almost closed now, the gap narrowing to nothing. You take a step forward. You slip through the narrowing gap just before the gates shut with a deep, resonant thud. The sound rolls through the street like a warning bell, and you feel the air change, cooler, heavier, as if the city itself exhales around you. Inside, the streets are narrower than they looked in the vision, paved with cobblestones slick from an earlier rain. Lanterns hang from wrought iron hooks, their flames trembling against the encroaching dusk. The cloaked figure doesn't wait for you to get your bearings. They stride ahead, and you fall into step. People move quickly here, eyes averted, each carrying some small burden. A wrapped loaf, a bundle of herbs, a jug of water. They speak in low voices that never quite rise above the sound of boots on stone. You notice that the deeper you go into the city, the fewer banners you see, until they disappear entirely. The figure leads you into a side street that smells faintly of vinegar and roasting meat. They stop before a plain wooden door and knock in a rhythm. 3 quick, 1 slow, 1 quick. Inside, a single candle flickers, casting long shadows across the faces gathered around a rough-hewn table. You recognize one of them immediately, the crowned woman from your vision in the pool. She looks at you as if she's been expecting you for weeks. "Sit," she says. It's not a request. You take the only empty seat. It's wood worn smooth by countless others. The room is filled with mismatched relics. An Aragonese sword propped in one corner, a Castilian shield hanging cracked on the wall, coins from kingdoms that no longer exist. The woman folds her hands. You've been outside the walls. You've seen what's coming. You start to speak, but she lifts a hand. Don't answer yet. Just listen. A man with parchment-thin skin and a map spread before him points to the western border. Aragon's forces will reach the river in 3 nights. If they find the crossings intact, they'll be here in 5. And if they don't, you ask. They'll find another way, he says without looking up. They always do. The crowned woman leans forward. There's an old road through the hills. Hidden. Dangerous. But if we can take it before they arrive, we can hold the upper pass. One of the others, tall, armored, and clearly skeptical, snorts. That road's been closed for decades, and for good reason. The last patrol that went there never came back. They never came back, she says evenly, because they didn't know where to look. The room falls silent, the only sound the faint creak of the candle's wick shifting. Finally, she turns to you. You'll go with them. You've walked paths others can't see. You open your mouth to object, but she cuts you off with a thin smile. Consider it a welcome gift to the city. Somewhere outside, the horn sounds again, closer this time. The cloaked figure rests a hand on your shoulder. Eat now, sleep if you can. We leave before dawn. The city is still asleep when you're shaken awake. The candle from last night has burned down to a puddle of wax, the air in the room cold enough to bite. The cloaked figure stands over you, already wearing a travel pack, their hood drawn low. You'll want this, they say, tossing you a water skin and a piece of flatbread that looks like it's been baked in a hurry. Don't lose it. Out there, losing water means losing time, and losing time means losing everything. The streets are nearly empty as you slip through them, only the occasional guard or stray cat crossing your path. Beyond the gate, a pale mist hugs the ground, rolling and curling like something alive. It's not until you've been walking for an hour that the terrain begins to change. The road narrows, the cobblestones giving way to packed dirt and twisted tree roots. The trees themselves lean inward, branches tangling overhead until the light fades to a permanent twilight. Somewhere far above, you hear the slow groan of wood in the wind, like the forest itself is warning you away. The others, 5 in total, move quietly. One carries a bough taller than you. Another wears a dented helm with no crest. They don't speak unless they have to, and when they do, it's in a low, clipped dialect you can't follow. After midday, the cloaked figure signals a halt. They kneel beside a moss-covered stone carved with a worn crest, a crown tower flanked by two lions. "This is the mark," they whisper. "Beyond here, the road isn't on any map." The road turns out to be a series of half-collapsed terraces that cling to the hillside. Your boots slip on loose shale as you follow the switchbacks upward. The mist thins here, replaced by a sharper, colder air that smells faintly of rain and iron. By the time you crest the ridge, the sun is gone, replaced by a deep indigo sky scattered with stars. Below, the valley stretches wide and empty. At least it should be empty, but you can see faint glimmers, like embers, scattered in clusters. "They're campfires," the archer says quietly. "More than I've seen in years. They're moving," someone else mutters, and you realize the lights aren't fixed. They're shifting, creeping toward the base of the pass like a slow, deliberate tide. The cloaked figure exhales sharply. "We're too late." "No!" The crowned woman's voice echoes in your memory, low and insistent. You've walked paths others can't see. The figure glances at you. "If you've got another way through, now's the time to speak up." The air is so still you can hear your own heartbeat. Somewhere in the dark behind you, something moves. Too heavy for an animal, too quiet for a person. And then you remember the first time you came here, how the land itself seemed to make room for you. Maybe it will again. The others are still arguing in hushed tones when you step away from the ridge. The ground feels different here, softer, almost hollow beneath your boots. You remember that in the pool's first vision you saw a ridge like this, but the soldiers had vanished into it as if swallowed whole. You crouch low, running your hand along the damp earth until your fingers catch on something. A seam. A faint line of stone barely peeks through the moss, set in an arc just wide enough for a person to slip through if they knew where to press. "Over here," you murmur. The cloaked figure joins you, eyes narrowing. "How did you?" "Later," you say, because explaining visions in the middle of enemy territory feels like an open invitation for more questions than you have time for. With a shove, the stone panel grinds inward, revealing a narrow tunnel sloping down into darkness. A rush of cool air carries the scent of wet rock and something older, like paper kept too long in a locked chest. The archer lights a torch, its glow barely touching the walls. The tunnel is just wide enough for you to walk single file, the floor worn smooth by countless feet long ago. The sound of the wind fades behind you, replaced by the steady drip of water and the occasional groan of settling stone. Half an hour in, you pass carvings. Spirals, crossed keys, and once a small crown. One of the soldiers traces the crown with a gloved hand. "This is royal work," they whisper. "Hidden roads for hidden wars." The cloaked figure mutters. "Not hidden enough, apparently." You walk for what feels like hours before the tunnel widens into a cavern. In the center lies a dry fountain, its basin cracked, the statue above it missing a face. Coins glint faintly in the torchlight, old, thick, stamped with symbols you don't recognize. "They've been here," the helm-wearing soldier says, holding up a coin fresh enough that the metal is still warm from a human hand. A shiver runs down your spine. "Recently?" He nods grimly. Before you can process that, a low rumble begins somewhere in the darkness ahead. The archer tightens their grip on the bow. That's not wind. The sound grows, a wet, scraping rhythm, like stone dragging over stone. Then, from the far side of the cavern, a shape emerges. Taller than any man, draped in chains that clink softly against its own weight. Its eyes, two pale discs, lock on you. The cloaked figure steps between you and the thing. "Run," they say flatly. But the tunnel behind you is no longer empty. Those faint campfire lights from the valley have found their way here, and you see shadows moving in the entrance. forward or back, both might kill you. And yet, for the briefest moment, you feel the earth shift under your boots, as if the mountain itself is considering opening another path. The air tastes of iron and dust as the ground shivers again under your feet. The chained figure steps closer, the sound of metal dragging echoing through the cavern like a slow, deliberate drumbeat. Behind you, the flicker of enemy torches grows brighter, shadows stretching long along the walls. You're pinned between a threat you can see and one you can't. Then, from somewhere beneath the stone, a hollow thud answers the rumble, as if the mountain itself has a heartbeat. The vibration climbs your legs, and the seams in the cavern floor widen. Fine lines at first, then deep cracks. The cloaked figure shouts over the noise. Don't move unless it's toward the opening. Whatever it shows you, it's not so much an opening as it is the earth deciding to make space. Stone folds inward like cloth being drawn aside, revealing a sloping chute. The torchlight barely touches its end, but you can smell fresh air and something sharper, pine and rain. Go! The cloaked figure orders, and the group scrambles toward the chute. You're last, the chain thing just a few paces behind, each step shaking dust from the ceiling. As you slide into the stone's throat, the walls feel warm, almost pulsing. The descent is fast, your boots barely finding purchase before the slope levels out into a narrow corridor. You can hear the others ahead, their breaths ragged. The air here is cooler, brighter, until it's suddenly flooded with a pale green glow. The corridor opens into a hidden valley so steep it's almost a bowl, its walls draped in moss and ivy. Pools of water dot the floor, reflecting the light from clusters of crystal embedded high in the rock. Not on any map, the archer says, awe creeping into their voice. At the center of the valley rises a tower, not tall, but wide, built from black basalt that drinks in the light. The stones are so precisely cut that no mortar shows between them. The cloaked figure's voice is low, almost reverent. The old seat of Aragon before the crown split. They called it La Torre de las Olas, the Tower of Waves, said to hold the last treaty that bound the kingdoms. One of the soldiers frowns. Treaties don't stop armies. No, the cloaked figure says, but what's inside might. You start down the slope, careful not to slide on the wet moss. The valley is silent except for the drip of water, until you realize it's not water at all, but the faint clink of metal from inside the tower. You've heard that sound before. The cloaked figure hears it too. We're not the first to find this place. The closer you get to the Tower of Waves, the more the sound resolves. Not random metal clinks, but a pattern, like someone slowly working a key into a lock. The black basalt walls seem to lean inward as you approach, swallowing light until even the moss at the base turns a muted gray. The tower's door isn't a door at all. It's a slab of stone, engraved with rippling lines that shift subtly when you move, giving the uncanny illusion of water lapping at its surface. You reach out, and the stone is cold, so cold it numbs your fingertips instantly. Not locked, the cloaked figure murmurs. Just waiting. When you push, it swings inward with the lazy resistance of something very heavy but very willing. The smell that greets you is damp parchment and oiled steel. Inside, the chamber is wide and circular, lit by narrow shafts where daylight filters through the crystal seams in the walls. Dust dances in the beams, and the floor is covered in a mosaic of blue and white tiles depicting a storm at sea. At the center of the storm stands a stone lectern. Upon it, carefully laid open, is a book so old its pages curl at the edges. The script is looping, neat, and in a language you can't place. But you barely have time to notice the book because in the shadows to the left, two figures are crouched over something metallic. One is small and wiry, the other broader, both wearing mismatched bits of armor. They freeze when your torchlight hits them. The archer draws an arrow. Step away from it. The wiry one hisses something in a tongue that sounds like water rushing over stones. The broad one grabs the object, a metal coffer, heavy enough to need both hands, and bolts toward the far side of the chamber. You're already moving before you realize it, boots pounding the mosaic. The broad one makes it to a narrow archway, but the cloaked figure is faster, slamming them against the wall with a shoulder. The coffer hits the floor with a ringing thud, pops open. Inside is not gold or jewels, but a small disc of silver etched with concentric circles and a crown at the center. Around the edge, tiny inlaid stones glint faintly. The cloaked figure exhales sharply. The seal of concord. One of the soldiers frowns. That's a myth. The cloaked figure corrects. The wiry one uses the distraction to dart forward, snatch the disc, and vanish through a low crawl space in the wall. By the time you reach it, they're gone. Echoes of scraping stone, the only trace left. Silence settles in the tower again. The cloaked figure stares at the empty coffer. If they leave this valley with the seal, the crowns will never be joined again. You glance at the open book on the lectern. The page seems to shimmer faintly, as if the ink were still wet. And in the curling script, you recognize, against all reason, your own name. Your breath catches as you stare at that curling script, your own name nestled among lines that look older than the walls holding them. The ink glistens faintly, as though it was written moments ago, yet the parchment is brittle and spotted with age. Behind you, the cloaked figure is already barking orders to the soldiers. They'll head for the north ridge. There's a passage that bypasses the cliffs. We split. The archer glances between you and the crawl space. You coming? Your hand lingers over the page. The letters around your name are fluid, almost alive, as though they're waiting for you to read them. The room seems to lean closer, the sound of dripping water replaced by a faint heartbeat you're not entirely sure is your own. One more glance. The lines resolve. The bearer of this name shall stand between the thrones when the tides turn. Neither crown shall claim the other until the waves obey their hand. You don't understand it, but it's enough to make your skin prickle. The cloaked figure's voice snaps you back. Choose now. You slide your fingers under the fragile page and, very carefully, tear it free. The parchment folds once, twice, and you slip it inside your tunic. Then you bolt for the crawl space. It's tighter than it looked. Your shoulders scrape stone, and the damp smell of earth presses in from all sides. The faint scrape of the thief's boots echoes ahead, quick and desperate. You emerge into a narrow fissure in the cliff face, where daylight filters in from high above. The thief is halfway up, clinging to ledges no wider than a coin. They glance down, eyes flashing in the green light that seeps from their satchel. The seal. Give it back, you shout. They respond with a laugh, sharp and strange, before scaling higher. Your fingers find holds, your boots bite into wet stone, and you climb. Halfway up, the cliff trembles. Not an earthquake this time, but a deep, rolling roar from somewhere below the valley. A flock of black birds bursts from the trees, scattering like thrown ash. The thief pauses, glancing toward the noise, then upward again. You use the hesitation to close the gap, fingers brushing their ankle before they kick free. The seal swings on its cord, catching the light for an instant before vanishing into the satchel again. You're almost at the top when the rock under your hand crumbles. Your grip slips, but your other hand catches a twisted root. As you dangle, the thief reaches the rim, throws you a grin, and disappears over the edge. Pulling yourself up, you crest the ridge just in time to see them vanish into a pine forest shrouded in mist. The sound of hoofbeats fades into the distance. The cloaked figure's voice echoes faintly from below. Don't lose them. Somewhere behind that mist, the seal of Concord is on the move, and you still have a page with your name written centuries before you were born. The pine forest swallows you like a closing fist. The light here is muted, green and gold, filtered through high needles that sway with the slow, groaning sound of rope under strain. The air smells of sap and damp bark, each breath heavy enough to taste. The ground muffles your steps, but not enough to mask the faint clink of metal ahead. You follow it deeper, keeping low, eyes fixed on where the mist folds and shifts. Every so often you catch a flash of movement, a shoulder slipping between trees, a satchel bouncing against a hip. You're gaining. Then the forest changes. The pines grow farther apart, and in the clearing stands something utterly out of place. A stone arch, freestanding, its keystone carved with the same concentric circles you saw on the seal. Lichen blooms across its base, and at its feet, two stone lions crouch, mouths slightly open as though about to speak. The thief is kneeling at the base of the arch, pulling the seal from the satchel. They set it into a shallow recess in the stone, and for a moment nothing happens. Then the air inside the arch begins to ripple water without wetness, casting wavering shadows across the ground. You step forward, but a hand clamps down on your shoulder. It's not the cloaked figure. The man is tall, wrapped in armor that's more decorative than practical, gold leaf still clinging to the edges. His helm is tucked under one arm, and his eyes are the pale gray of distant surf. "Walk in there now," he murmurs, "and you won't walk back." The thief glances over their shoulder at him. "Not you," and their expression is uneasy. "We had a deal," they hiss. "Deals change." The man's grip on your shoulder tightens. The crowns cannot meet yet, not while the tides are wrong. From the arch, a low hum begins to build, resonating in your chest cavity like the bass from an oversized speaker. The rippling air grows clearer, and you can see through it what looks like a city of white towers under a storm-dark sky. The thief hesitates, torn between stepping through and whatever this armored man represents. You twist under his grip, breaking free just as the thief makes their choice. They dart into the arch. The ripple snaps closed behind them with a sound like a wave hitting stone. The seal is gone. The armored man exhales slowly, as if this was inevitable. You've just made things complicated. Somewhere above, the pines groan again, and for a moment you think it's the wind, until the sound resolves into words in a language you don't know, whispered from tree to tree. The forest grows silent after the archway closes, as if it's holding its breath. The whispered language woven through the pines fades into the rustle of needles and the distant cry of a lone hawk. But you feel eyes, thousands of them, hidden in bark and shadow, watching, waiting. The armored man steps beside you, his expression unreadable. "This forest," he says, voice low, "is older than the kingdoms. It remembers the treaties, the betrayals, and the blood spilled over promises broken." You glance down at the ground where the seal had rested. There's nothing now but a shallow indentation, as if the stone itself had swallowed it whole. "Why show me this?" you ask. He meets your gaze. "Because the balance is tipping. The crowns may have lost their thrones, but their power lingers, waiting for a chance to rise again." A sudden breeze stirs the needles overhead, scattering sun-dappled patterns onto the forest floor. "The arch," he continues, "is a doorway, not just between places, but times. Step through and you risk becoming a ghost in a story that's already been written." You think of the city in the shimmering water, the vision from the pool, the black-starred banners waving defiantly. "And the thief, a pawn," he replies. "Like all who chase power they do not understand." He turns away, his armor catching the light with a soft gleam. "There's a path out of this forest, But it's not a road. It's a choice. You realize then that every step you've taken, every shadow you've chased, has led you here, to a crossroads where history and destiny blur. The forest exhales, the trees creaking softly as if in approval or warning. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of all those unseen eyes. And you know the journey isn't over. You stand still among the pine trees, and though you hear no human voice, you can feel invisible eyes following your every step. The forest seems to breathe steadily, the rustling leaves sounding like whispers. A strange language meant only for those who know how to listen closely. The man in golden armor stands beside you, his voice barely above a murmur, as if afraid to disturb the ancient woods. This forest, it is older than the kingdoms long since fallen. It remembers every treaty, every plot, and the blood spilled over broken promises. You glance down at the seal that had just been placed. Only a smooth hollow remains in the stone, as if the rock had swallowed it ages ago. You ask, "Why am I being shown this?" He looks you straight in the eye. Because the balance is beginning to shift. Crowns, even without thrones, still hold power, waiting for their moment to return. A light breeze passes, scattering rays of sunlight across the ground. That stone gate, he continues, is not merely a door between places, but a door between times. Step through it, and you could easily become a ghost in a story already written. You recall the city in the vision beneath the water, the black star banners still fluttering in defiance. And the thief, just a pawn, he replies, like all who chase power without understanding it. He turns away, his armor catching faint glimmers of light. The way out of this forest isn't a path, it's a choice. You realize now, every step you've taken, every shadow you've followed, has led you here, this crossroads of history and fate, where all things converge. The ancient forest exhales, the trees murmuring as if in warning or agreement. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes upon you. You know for certain the journey is far from over. You don't so much step into the crossroads as you arrive there, the way you sometimes wake up and wonder if you've been walking in your sleep. The trees thin out, their whispering receding into a low hum, and suddenly you're standing in an open space where 4 paths bleed away into different horizons. One smells faintly of salt and seaweed, the coast road, maybe leading to Aragon's old ports, now little more than ghost harbors and stubborn fishing shacks. Another is warm with a scent of dust and figs, the kind of road Castilian messengers would have galloped down with their leather satchels bulging with news of coronations or assassinations. The third? Well, it just smells wrong, like wet parchment, burnt metal, and that odd ozone tang you get when a summer storm is still thinking about whether it's worth the effort. And the fourth path is the strangest of all. It doesn't seem to go anywhere at all, just fades into a shimmer of air, as if someone forgot to finish painting that part of the world. Your mysterious companion isn't here anymore. Figures, historical guides always seem to vanish right before the hard decisions. You're left with the sound of your own heartbeat, and somewhere, faint but there, the clang of armor, the stomp of hooves, the echo of a language you can't quite place. History tells you these crossroads existed, literal ones, where envoys from Castile, Aragon, and neighboring kingdoms met to decide everything from trade routes to royal marriages. The common story says they were just dusty meeting points. The less common story, that each crossroads was a kind of living trial. Choose the wrong path, and you didn't just lose a war, you lost your place in the story. You run your fingers over a weathered milestone in the center. The engravings have been eaten away by centuries, but you catch fragments. A crown, a wave, a hand gripping something. Scholars still argue whether that something was a sword or a key. Maybe they're both wrong. A breeze pushes against your back, as if nudging you toward one path. Then, just as quickly, it shifts, tugging at your sleeve in the opposite direction. You realize the air itself is undecided, which is somehow worse than it being hostile. You take a step toward the sea-smelling road, then stop. No, maybe the fig road, or the shimmer, or the one that smells like the inside of a library caught in a lightning storm. And that's when you hear it. A low, almost amused voice, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Choose, traveler, or I'll choose for you. You pick the sea road, or maybe it picks you. The moment your foot lands on it, the others blur, their scents and shapes folding inward like they were only ever options in someone else's dream. The air shifts, warmer, heavier, infused with salt and the faint squeal of distant gulls. Your boots crunch over pale gravel that glitters in the sunlight. It's not ordinary rock. It's crushed shells, worn down by centuries of tides and trade. You can almost see the caravels rocking at anchor, their sails stitched with the crests of kingdoms that haven't existed for hundreds of years. In the time of the crown of Aragon's maritime height, this coast was the empire's pulse. Not just a navy, but a sprawling network of ports, each one a chessboard square in a Mediterranean game where every move could win you spices, gold, or an enemy fleet at your doorstep. The popular version of the story says the ships went out for trade and glory. The quieter truth? Many were shadow fleets, carrying letters sealed in wax so black it reflected no light, orders meant to topple rivals without a single cannon fired. You pass a cluster of low stone ruins, an old watchtower, maybe, though its narrow windows feel more like the eyes of someone still watching. A scrap of iron juts from the sand nearby, the eaten remains of a ship's anchor. It hums faintly when you touch it, a vibration in your bones, like the ocean's memory trapped in metal. You remember something your vanishing guide said earlier. The crowns you've forgotten are the ones still watching you. Well, the sea here is doing more than watching. It's whispering. Long, drawn-out syllables in a tongue that rolls like the tide. Scholars still debate whether the Aragonese fleets ever made it as far as the Atlantic coast of Africa before the Portuguese did. The records are messy, riddled with missing pages, forged signatures, and convenient storms that sank ships exactly when a ledger might have been embarrassing. You walk until the path becomes a pier, impossibly intact despite the centuries, and you see it. A single vessel, small, lacquered black, no sails, no oars, just floating there like it's been waiting all along. Its figurehead is a lion wearing a crown that doesn't belong to any known kingdom. The water below is so clear you can see the seabed, littered with amphorae, coins, and, stranger still, fragments of carved stone arches. You've seen those arches before, underwater in the mirage. The boat bobs gently. No invitation, no threat, just inevitability. The wood beneath your boots sighs as you step onto the pier, as if it's relieved you've finally made up your mind. The boat rocks once, slow and deliberate, like it's nodding in approval. You're half expecting a robed ferryman with a taste for ominous metaphors, but the deck is empty, unless you count the coiled rope that looks unervingly like it's breathing. You step aboard. The planks are warm, not from the sun, but from something deeper, as though the ship itself has a pulse. There's no tiller, no sail, no visible crew, yet the moment your weight settles, it begins to drift forward. The pier falls away behind you, swallowed by the shimmering horizon. The sea is glassy, unbroken except for the occasional flicker of silver fish darting beneath the surface. You lean over the side, and there it is again, that underwater landscape, clearer now. Broken columns, flagstones, even the outline of a street. This was no shipwreck graveyard. This was a drowned city. The official records say the Crown of Aragon never lost a city to the sea. That's the safe version. The quiet rumor, the one whispered in certain coastal taverns centuries later, insists that an entire port vanished overnight. Ships, warehouses, nobles' houses, all swallowed by a wave that came without a storm. Some claimed it was punishment for a deal made with the wrong ally. Others said it was a deliberate sinking, a way to erase a place that had seen too much. The boat slows. You realize you're gliding straight toward an arch rising from the water, the same crowned lion motif carved along its curve. It's older than Aragon, older than the crowns you've been chasing through time. The air here tastes metallic, like the moment before lightning. And then you hear it. Not the ocean's whisper this time, but singing. Low, rhythmic, the syllables ancient and rolling. It's not coming from the water, but from inside the boat. The deck beneath you vibrates, and a seam opens along the center, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling down into the hull. The singing stops. Somewhere in the dark below, a voice calm, certain says, "If you've come for the lost thrones, you're already too late." Your fingers find the railing of the narrow stair. It's slick, not with seawater, but with oil, thick and faintly perfumed, like something used to keep ancient wood from splintering. The seam closes above you as you descend, sealing out the sunlight. Only the faint blue glow from below guides your steps, bending shadows over the curve of the walls. The air changes, warm, still, smelling faintly of citrus and burnt copper. You step into a chamber far larger than the hull should allow, the sort of architectural trick that makes you question whether ship is even the right word anymore. In the center, a man sits cross-legged on a carpet patterned with waves and crowns. His robes are the deep blue of midnight water, threaded with gold so fine it catches the glow like trapped starlight. On the floor around him, hundreds of small objects are laid in precise circles. Rusted coins, shards of pottery, carved chess pieces, lengths of chain polished bright. "You've seen the city," he says, not asking. His voice is the same one that spoke from the dark, but now you hear the grain of age in it. Not fragile, but weathered, like driftwood. It wasn't taken by storm, it was taken by choice. He tells you the story, how the city, Port Corona, though no map today names it, was the jewel of Aragon's merchant empire, a place where silk from the east and silver from the New World crossed paths. But it held something more dangerous than trade. Documents, sealed in iron chests, that detailed pacts between crowns too volatile to survive the light. When one of those crowns began to crumble, the others agreed, better to drown the truth than let it be taken. A strange fact. Divers in later centuries claimed that the streets underwater were empty of human remains. Not a single skeleton, not a single corpse. The city had walked into the sea before the wave came. He picks up one of the coins from the circle and rolls it toward you. The metal is smooth on one side, but the other shows a crowned lion, the same as the figurehead. "Every kingdom leaves a mark," he says, "but not every mark wants to be found." You ask him what happened to the thrones, the ones you've been tracing since Castile's corridors and Aragon's ports. He laughs softly. "Some are buried in stone, others in blood. This one," he gestures to the ship around you, "is buried in time." Then the glow brightens and the chamber tilts. The ship isn't floating anymore, sinking not into the water, but into the air, down through a column of light so clear you can see shapes moving in it. Shapes wearing crowns you've never seen before. The man doesn't move. "If you want the next piece," he says, "you'll have to walk through what's already gone." The floor opens beneath you. There's no impact when you land, just a gentle sinking, like dropping into a warm bath that's somehow also a cathedral. The light around you is liquid, thick enough to slow your movements but not enough to drown you. Every breath tastes faintly of incense and salt. Shapes sharpen as you drift down. Columns rise on either side, spiraling like twisted ropes, each crowned with silver torchlight that doesn't flicker. The floor beneath your feet resolves into a mosaic, blue and gold tiles forming the silhouette of two thrones side by side, their backs touching like mirrored spines. And then you hear it, the sound of an entire hall inhaling at once. You're standing at the back of a throne room, though no throne yet occupies the dais. The air vibrates with expectation. A figure in a robe of red velvet steps forward, carrying a cushion. On it rests a crown unlike the others you've seen. No spikes, no crosses, no gemstones. Instead, it's smooth gold, a simple band etched with a single line of script you can't read. The letters seem to move when you try to focus. The coronation you're watching isn't one that appears in any history book. The crowd's attire is wrong for the period you think you're in, half Castilian brocade, half Aragonese silk, but styles that shouldn't have existed together. Some of the guests wear talismans of kingdoms you know fell centuries apart. A historian would tell you this scene can't exist. In fact, some do. There are heated debates among those few who've seen old sketches claiming to depict it. Was it a union that never happened, a vision of what might have been, or a deliberate forgery? No one agrees, and no one can prove it either way. The crown is placed not on one ruler's head, but on both. The seated man and woman lean toward each other, and the band slides over both brows in a single motion. You can't tell if it's symbolic or some act of binding more literal. The hall exhales again, and somewhere behind you, a door slams shut. The torches flare white. The mosaic at your feet shifts, the tiles rearranging into a map you recognize. Iberia, but fractured into more pieces than you've ever seen. Small, unnamed kingdoms swarm over it like ants, each crowned in miniature. The crowned pair look directly at you, not past you, not through you, at you. You've been following ghosts, the man says. And ghosts, the woman finishes, don't always lead you home. The floor gives way. You hit the ground this time, but softly, on grass that smells of rain and wood smoke. The air is cool, the light dim in that way that feels like late afternoon, though the sun itself is nowhere to be seen. Ahead, a cluster of stone houses crouches along a winding path, each roof heavy with moss and tiny white flowers. The place has the scale of a toy village. Narrow streets you could cross in 3 steps, doorways barely reaching your shoulders. Yet there's nothing whimsical about it. The air here hums faintly, like the inside of a seashell pressed to your ear. Someone is watching you. From behind a crooked wooden gate, a woman in a pale green cloak studies you without speaking. Her eyes are an odd shade, almost silver, and her hands rest on the hilt of a knife that looks far too modern for the century you think you're in. She says one word, a name you've never heard, but it feels like it belongs to you. You follow her through the narrow lanes to a square where a single building stands apart. Half chapel, half granary, its walls patched with mismatched stone. Inside, every surface is etched with symbols. Crowns, suns, and something that might be a map or might be a star chart. This was Callister, she says at last. A kingdom small enough to vanish between the pages. She tells you that Callister's crown was never worn. It was kept in a chest, hidden away, because the rulers believed the crown itself carried a debt to some older power. They governed without it, hoping to escape whatever bargain their ancestors had made. It almost worked. Almost. The strange fact. The chest was found centuries later, miles away, washed up on the coast. Still sealed, the crown inside untouched, the wood smelling faintly of salt and cedar. No one knows who moved it or why. Some say it was the sea claiming a debt that land had tried to forget. She leads you to the back wall, where a stone is loose. Behind it, something glints. Not gold, but polished bronze. engraved with a pattern you've seen before in Castile's corridors and Aragon's portico tiles. The mark of the lost thrones. The hum in the air grows louder until it's almost a vibration in your bones. She looks at you as if weighing a decision. You can't take it with you, she says, but you can carry where it leads. The bronze warms under your touch. The village fades, replaced by the slow, gentle unraveling of light, like someone dimming the world's lantern. The sound becomes softer, more distant, as if it's following you into sleep. And now we let the pace slow, each image dissolving into the next like ink in water. You walk not on land or sea, but on a ribbon of faint gold, stretching into a sky without stars. Every step is lighter, your breath longer, the air warmer. There's nothing chasing you now, no crown to claim, no map to follow. Just the memory of doors you've opened and the feel of them closing behind you. Somewhere far away, the sound of waves against stone drifts in, a lullaby from a shore you'll never stand on. The ribbon bends, carrying you gently downward. Even the thought of questions, who ruled, what was lost, what was found, feels too heavy to hold. The hum has become a whisper, and the whisper becomes silence. And as your eyes close, the last thing you see is a crown-shaped shadow, slipping quietly into the dark. The silence breaks with the crunch of gravel beneath your feet. You're standing on a narrow causeway that seems to float over still, black water. Mist hangs low, curling in lazy spirals, hiding everything except the faint orange glow ahead. You walk toward it, each step echoing as though the water itself is hollow. The glow resolves into a lantern swinging from the hand of a tall man in a faded red surcoat. He doesn't speak, just turns and starts walking, the light drawing you forward like a moth resigned to its fate. Eventually, the mist thins enough to reveal an island, not much more than a lump of rock crowned by a square fortress. Its walls are weathered smooth by centuries of wind, yet the banner flying from its highest point is strangely vivid, a white falcon on a field of deep blue. Inside, the corridors smell of parchment and iron. You pass through a hall lined with carved falcons, each with tiny garnet eyes that glimmer in the lantern light. The man stops at a heavy oak door, pushes it open, and gestures you inside. It's a library, but unlike any you've seen. The shelves are built into the walls in spirals, and instead of books, they hold long scrolls wrapped in cloth. One hangs half open, revealing neat script in 2 languages. One you recognize as early Castilian, the other a jagged script that looks almost like claw marks. This, the man finally says, is Falcaterra, the kingdom that spoke in 2 tongues, but only wrote in 1. He tells you the rulers here believed the spoken word was alive, dangerous, mutable, but the written word was an anchor to bind history in place. So they kept their true laws and treaties only in writing, never read aloud. The strange fact, Falcaterra's final treaty was signed but never unrolled. When the kingdom fell, the scroll was hidden under a flagstone, found centuries later still sealed with wax. Historians can't agree whether it was a peace treaty or a surrender. The seal's emblem, a falcon clutching a crown, appears nowhere else in surviving records. The man offers you the sealed scroll, but the moment you touch it, the air in the library shifts. You hear the faint beat of wings overhead, though the ceiling is solid stone. The lantern flickers, and in that flicker, the shelves seem to tilt, spirals unwinding toward the door. You step back onto the causeway, the scroll now just a ribbon of blue cloth in your hand. The fortress fades behind you into the mist. The man with the lantern is gone. Ahead, the causeway ends where the mist opens into a starless horizon, and you keep walking. The causeway dissolves under your feet like foam, but you don't fall. You drift forward as if the air itself has decided to carry you. A faint, rhythmic thump creeps into your ears, and you realize it's not your heartbeat. It's drums. Slow, deliberate, and far away. The darkness splits, and you find yourself standing in the middle of a dry riverbed. The ground is cracked and pale, the kind of white that hurts your eyes. In the distance, flames flicker on a hilltop, each one too steady to be a campfire. You start walking, the crunch of dust under your boots falling into sync with the drums. As you climb, you see the source of the light, braziers burning in a circle around a low stone platform. Atop it, a woman in bronze armor kneels beside a chest the size of a small coffin. Her armor is scorched in places, and the plumes of her helmet are singed. She speaks without looking up. "You're late." The lid of the chest is carved with a crest you've never seen. A single almond-shaped eye over a wavy line, like a lidless watchman staring out across a river. She explains that you've stumbled into the last night of Albuluna, a kingdom that lived and died by its rivers. Here, water wasn't just life, it was power. Whoever controlled the flow controlled the land. The fact that sticks in your mind. Albuluna engineers were so skilled they built channels that could be rerouted overnight. Whole valleys would wake up to find their crops watered, or their fields turned to desert, depending on who sat on the throne. Some say it's what made them rich. Others say it's what got them destroyed. The woman snaps the chest shut and stands. "The river's gone," she says, "and so are we." The drums stop. You feel a cold wind sweep the hilltop, and when you glance over your shoulder, the riverbed you crossed is gone, replaced by a plain of black glass stretching into nothing. She presses something into your palm, a small brass key, and pushes you backward. The world tips, and you fall through a sheet of water that wasn't there a moment ago. You're weightless again, tumbling in silence. You hit the ground softly, like landing in a pile of feathers. The darkness peels away to reveal a courtyard drenched in twilight. The air smells faintly of rosemary and iron, and somewhere above you, a fountain murmurs. The brass key in your hand is warm now, almost pulsing. You follow the sound of water until you find it. A tall, tiered fountain carved entirely from pale green stone. But instead of water, sand trickles down each tier in thin, shimmering streams. A figure sits on the fountain's edge, an elderly man in a cloak stitched with tiny silver moons. He's reading from a scroll so long it coils on the ground like a sleeping snake. He doesn't look up when he says, "You've been carrying other people's endings. Maybe it's time you saw a beginning." He gestures to the fountain. "This is Terenza." Once, they swore they would never mark time with clocks or calendars. They marked it with the sand instead. Each grain died to tell the story of a single day. Red for a victory, black for a betrayal, gold for a wedding, blue for a birth. The odd fact, Terenza's historians still don't know where the dyed sand came from. It's not native to their lands, and no trade records mention it. Some think it was ground from gemstones. Others insist it was sifted from a hidden desert that swallowed itself centuries ago. The man finally meets your gaze. His eyes are pale green, the same color as the fountain stone. The key you hold opens a chest in this city, but the city is gone, and the chest has no lock. Before you can ask, the fountain gives a low groan. The sand's flow speeds up, colors blurring, tears overflowing. The man drops his scroll and stands, cloak whipping in an unseen wind. "You'd better go," he says, almost kindly. "When the sand runs out, the day ends. All the days end." The courtyard stretches, warps, and you're pulled backward through an alley that narrows to the width of a whisper. The sound of the fountain's groan follows you until it's replaced by something else. Faint music, like a lullaby played on glass. You stumble into the next place before you even realize you've left the last one. The music is faint at first, but as you step forward, it wraps around you. A slow, glimmering melody that seems to arrive from every direction at once. The ground beneath your feet is soft, almost springy, like walking on layers of velvet. The air tastes faintly of honey and smoke. Ahead, the darkness thins into a hazy gold, and you see what's making the sound. Rows of tall, narrow goblets, each filled to a different height with water, arranged in concentric circles around a sunken stage. A woman in a long crimson gown glides between them, tapping the rims with a thin silver rod. Every note she plays sends ripples across the water's surface, ripples that don't fade, but grow and overlap like slow-moving clouds. You realize this is no random music. It's an old Castilian court tune, but slowed down so much that every note feels like it could last a lifetime. She notices you and smiles, the kind of smile you've only ever seen in old portraits. Still, composed, but hiding an entire story. She tells you you've entered the Hall of Resonance, a place where rulers once came to hear their own decisions played back to them as music. Victories rang bright and sharp. Mistakes were low and trembling. Betrayals were dissonant, sour enough to make glass crack. The odd fact, some visitors claimed they could hear events that hadn't happened yet, as if the hall recorded not just the past, but the possible. Historians still argue whether this was just the mind playing tricks in the presence of so much echo, or something stranger. The woman dips her rod into one of the goblets and stirs the water. The note it releases is so deep you feel it in your ribs. The ripples from all the goblets swell together, overlapping until the circles blur into one vast, gently shifting surface. She leans close and whispers, "This is the part you can't take with you." Then she touches the water, and the entire room folds in on itself like a sheet being drawn over a sleeping figure. The last sound you hear before the world changes is that deep, steady note. Fading, fading, fading. When the note finally dies, there's no sound at all. The silence isn't empty. It's warm, like a heavy quilt draped over your shoulders. You find yourself standing in a narrow passageway lined with pale stone. Every surface here glows faintly, not from any visible light source, but as if the walls remember the sun. Your footsteps are soft, almost hesitant now. You've been through so many halls, courtyards, markets, and battlefields that the quiet feels foreign. A gentle breeze threads through the corridor, carrying the faintest scent of orange blossom. Ahead, the passage opens into a small terrace. You step out and see it. The kingdoms you've wandered, stitched together like pieces of a vast, uneven tapestry. The towers of Castile, the plazas of Aragon, the shadowed streets of forgotten ports, all shimmering as if viewed through water. Somewhere, you think you can still hear the slow music of the Hall of Resonance. Somewhere else, the groan of the sand fountain. You lean on the terrace's low wall. Down in the dark valleys, lights flicker on, one by one, as if the cities are slowly remembering themselves. A low mist curls through the streets, softening the edges, blurring the sharpness of memory. Your hand drifts to your pocket. The brass key is gone. You're not surprised. Maybe it was never yours to keep. Maybe the journey was the lock, and you've already turned it. A voice, low, calm, and impossibly close, says, "It's enough for tonight." You don't turn to see who spoke. You just let the words settle over you like the night itself. The lights in the valleys grow dim. The mist thickens. The terrace's edge dissolves into nothing, but you're not falling. You're simply drifting. Each breath feels slower, longer. The details fade. The orange blossom, the glow of the stone, the distant notes, until all that's left is the steady rhythm of your own breathing. And then, like a candle in the gentlest wind, the world slips into darkness.